Welcome out to the show tonight, guys. Studio 321. This is Eddie B. So, is Trump a dictator? Okay. It's all over the internet constantly nowadays. You know, Trump's a fascist. He's a Nazi. He's Hitler. He's a dictator. He's an authoritarian. You know, you hear the whole gambit, right? It's all over the internet all the time, and it's always coming out of the left. Now, I decided to do this podcast tonight. You know, I'm on one of my late night rants. It's about 3:30 in the morning, and I've been just laying around thinking about this all night. You know, it's all you ever hear out of the left. It's the same old story. You know, he's Hitler, he's a dictator, he's this, he's that, and you know, I think it's silly. I think it's kind of a immature argument, but you know, it works. And we're going to get into that a little bit tonight. So, but anyways, guys, if you like my videos, please like and subscribe. It helps my channel, helps spread the word. And, you know, like-minded people, man, we got to think alike. So, is Trump a dictator, right? Okay, so the leaders of we're going to call it the Liberal Democrat Party, because that's basically what it is nowadays. You know, they put out this information all the time. And the truth is, you know, you have the smart folks, and then you have the followers, and that's the way everything. You know, it's that way on both sides, right? And it's that way in every society. Well, the smart folks, you know, they're the manipulators. You know, they make up stories to get everybody fezzed up. They know all this stuff is false. You know what I'm saying? And then, you know, they know it's not true, but they use it as a, you know, political weapon. It gets everybody hyped up and, gets them ready to vote and go against each other and all that stuff. So the left constantly uses that type of stuff for their followers. Now, the right does it as well, but not to the same extent, okay? So you would expect the leaders to do that because, again, they're the smart manipulators. But I've always wondered, why do the voters and the normal folks believe this stuff, right? And it drives me crazy because I've been watching it for years, and I'm like, man, I don't understand how you know, they fall for this simple stuff all the time. Like, oh, he's a dictator, he's Hitler, he's a Nazi. But if it wasn't Trump, it would be any Republican, right? It would be the same line for any Republican, whether they're black. You know, if they're black Republican, they're an Uncle Tom. You know, if they're a white Republican, they're a Nazi. Like, it's always the same stuff. I've always wondered, why do they believe what their leaders tell them? Because it always gets proven over and over again to be false, right? But here's the thing. I believe that there's a disconnect in the liberal mind, okay, between freedom or freedoms, we'll call it actually limited freedoms, and absolute freedom, okay? Now, I'm going to explain the difference. So a limited freedom would be something like, okay, you're allowed to drive your car down the road as long as you abide by the rules. You don't speed, you don't swerve, you don't crash, you're not dangerous to other people, right? That would be a limited freedom. You have the freedom to drive and go where you want as long as you do A, B, and C and don't hurt anybody, right? An absolute freedom in that case would be you can do anything you want in your car, no matter what you do. You can drive down the street, you can speed, you can run people over, you could play chicken with other cars, you could cause crashes. That would be an absolute freedom. So it seems to me nowadays that the liberals, somewhere in their mind, have lost the connection between the two. So they feel like anything that is not an absolute freedom is somehow authoritarian, you know, or fascism or something to that effect, right? So, and I've that to me, it's just normal way of thinking. Like, okay, you know, we have freedoms, but you can only do things up to a certain level, right? I mean, I'm free. I have, you know, free will to walk around my house and go outside, but I can't just go kill my neighbor, right? So I mean, like, we normal folks have that line in their mind where they go, you know, this is all I'm allowed to do. And the truth is, most of that is set up by, I'm going to say, cultural norms or like societal codes, right? Like we all know there's certain things we just should not do. But I tend to wonder sometimes if liberals have that line in their mind, and maybe that's the reason they go so crazy all the time. Their protests turn into these just weird, exhibitions of like protest and dressing up funny and all the weird stuff that they do, and it seems really childish and strange, or they're quick to get violent. They turn into violent mobs, and I've always wondered if maybe they don't have that line in their mind, or they don't understand that a limited freedom, which is what we have, is not an absolute freedom, and maybe that's what they want, or actually maybe that's what they think they want, because that doesn't really work in society. It doesn't. Unfortunately, human nature sometimes is bad, and there is a certain part of, or actually percentage of society that just does not know how to behave. They do not know how to function around other people. So you have to have rules in place to keep the structure for the entire society. And some people can't do it. You know what I mean? They, in their own mind, they don't have these lines, so they have to have external, guidelines, which is rules and laws and laws. If you break the law, you go to jail. So there's risk involved. So now they start to understand that they can't do things like that. Okay. So getting back to the dictator part, it seems right now, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the Democrats don't really have any other play to make right now. They don't have anything. They don't have any good political agenda. They don't really have a lot of stuff going on. So they're just trying to use the, dictator, authoritarian stuff. And it works for, I think, maybe 30% of the Democrats, right? Like the real cuckoo ones. And they believe anything you tell them. And, but it just doesn't make sense to me, how they can go over and over because again, if it wasn't Trump, it'd be the next guy. If Trump was gone tomorrow and J.D. Vance was up there, they'd be calling him a Nazi by next week. You know what I mean? So it's the same thing over and over again, and they never seem to make that connection that maybe it's just a bunch of BS. And that stuff has driven me crazy for years. Because again, I'm pretty much, I'm a middle of the road type of guy. I mean, I'm not a hardcore conservative. I've had some slightly liberal views in the past. I mean, I'm really just kind of a middle of the road. But I just can't understand how people, believe this stuff over and over again when it never turns out to be true. You know what I mean? It just doesn't. So, I've really been studying and watching it because I've been trying to figure it out. Like, why are these people this way? Not taking away all the political views and stuff, but why do they think in this type of thought pattern? And for me, it's come down to, I believe that they do not draw a distinction between limited freedoms and absolute freedom, and for some reason, a lot of them think that absolute freedom is, the way it should be in society, and it's not. You can't have a society that way because it would completely be dominated by the strong. The weak would be enslaved, whether it's, slaves in chains or some type of slave, it would be, the weak would be enslaved. That would be society, And so we have these rules and these limited freedoms to keep everybody, with again, the same amount of limited freedoms. And they don't seem to understand that, and I don't know why. I think a lot of times, a lot of liberals don't seem like they're very worldly. They don't have a lot of life experience. Maybe where they're from, they've never had to deal with like any type of violence or any type of, I don't know, stress or crime or anything. So they feel like everybody's that way and that everybody can just be free to do whatever they want. Now, if you come from where I come from, that that's not true. You have to have laws because they'd be killing each other. They'd be going crazy, taking from each other, rape, all that stuff. It would be insane. And So yeah, I wanted to do this show because I know Trump's been cracking down lately, cracking down on DC, and some other cities are starting to kind of follow suit, and they want to get things straightened out. And you got all these liberals in the street screaming in their face, calling them names, acting like it's a bad thing to have that. When you watch that and you're just going, man, like, what is wrong with these people? You know? And some of the funny thing is, some of those, because you can tell you're watching TV, some of them are the weakest people you've ever seen. They need total protection from everything. Like, they need 911 all day long. They couldn't defend themselves for any reason, and yet they're the ones out there all the time advocating for less laws and less. It's just crazy. But anyways, guys, yeah, I don't want to do a long video tonight. I just thought it would be cool to put this out there. Tell me what you think, man. Hit me up, because I can't figure it out. You know what I mean? I really can't. I've been watching these people for a long time. I just don't know how they think. And it's very strange. So hit me up in the comments section, guys. Let me know what you think. I hope you liked the video. This is Eddie from Studio 321. Talk to you soon. Have a good night.